The decisive, ultimate victory of the Allied powers in World War II was not won solely on the bloody beaches of Normandy or the freezing plains of Stalingrad. It was fundamentally won in the sprawling factories, shipyards, and assembly lines of the United States. Upon entering the war after the devastating attack on Pearl Harbor, the U.S. government rapidly initiated the most massive, comprehensive economic and industrial mobilization in world history. This effort, often termed the production miracle, utterly transformed the nation from a country still struggling to shake off the lingering effects of the Great Depression into the undisputed arsenal of democracy. The scale of this industrial output, producing material for not just American forces, but also for its allies via the Lend-Lease program, was so immense that historians now unequivocally agree it completely overwhelmed the combined industrial capacity of the entire Axis coalition, making long-term German and Japanese victory structurally impossible. The foundational mechanism for this transformation was the War Production Board, WPB, established in January 1942. Its authority was unparalleled. The WPB wielded the power to allocate scarce resources, prohibit non-essential civilian production, such as new cars, refrigerators, and decorative metal goods, and impose strict, mandatory manufacturing quotas on all American industries. The strategic objective was simple: convert the vast, peacetime industrial infrastructure from automotive factories to sewing machine plants into an unstoppable engine for war material. Crucially, the WPB implemented the Controlled Materials Plan, CMP, which meticulously regulated the flow of critical commodities like steel, copper, and aluminum, ensuring that military production always received absolute priority over every other competing demand, effectively channeling the nation's entire physical resources toward the war effort. At the heart of this miracle was the stunning conversion of the American automotive industry. Led by giants like Henry Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler, the industry completely ceased civilian car production in February 1942. The world's largest consumer manufacturing sector quickly pivoted to building tanks, aircraft, and military trucks. Ford's colossal Willow Run factory, near Detroit, perhaps best symbolized this transformation. Originally designed to produce cars, it was quickly retooled into a massive, integrated assembly line capable of producing a single B-24 Liberator bomber every single hour at its peak, transforming traditional assembly line techniques for massive, complex aircraft production. The sheer, staggering production statistics remain mind-boggling. Over the course of the war, the United States produced an astonishing 300,000 military aircraft, including heavy bombers and fighters. It manufactured 86,000 tanks and armored vehicles and approximately 2.5 million military trucks. Crucially, for the Battle of the Atlantic, American shipyards delivered 1,550 major warships and over 6,500 naval vessels of all classes. This unprecedented industrial avalanche effectively buried the Axis powers under an insurmountable tidal wave of military hardware, ensuring logistical superiority in every theater of the war. The massive undertaking demanded an equally massive, rapid expansion of the American labor force. The war successfully ended the Great Depression by creating over 17 million new civilian jobs and reducing unemployment to historically low levels, often below 2%. Millions of workers migrated from rural areas and the depressed South to the industrial centers of the North, Midwest, and West Coast. The immense demand for labor was met by recruiting two traditionally marginalized groups who stepped into the void: women and African Americans, fundamentally reshaping the demographic and social landscape of the American workforce. The iconic figure of Rosie the Riveter became the enduring symbol of the American women who poured into defense plants, shipyards, and heavy manufacturing jobs previously reserved exclusively for men. Over 6 million women entered the workforce during the war, representing nearly 35% of the total labor force by 1945. They demonstrated immense capability in skilled trades, operating heavy machinery, welding and riveting, effectively shattering long-held industrial gender barriers and proving their essential role in the national effort. This experience permanently altered public perception of women's capabilities and laid the groundwork for the post-war feminist movement. The war also created an immense, though often contested, opportunity for African Americans. Despite pervasive institutionalized racism and segregation, hundreds of thousands of African Americans moved from the rural South to northern and West Coast cities to take on high-paying defense jobs. Faced with persistent discrimination in hiring, civil rights leader A. Philip Randolph threatened a massive march on Washington in 1941. This pressure forced President Roosevelt to issue Executive Order 8802, which officially prohibited racial discrimination in defense industries and the federal government, marking a pivotal, early victory for the burgeoning civil rights movement. The success of the American effort depended critically on the efficient mass production of ships. The sheer size of the American workforce and the use of revolutionary prefabricated techniques made the Liberty ship program a logistical marvel. Shipyards, such as those run by Henry J. Kaiser on the West Coast, pioneered assembly line shipbuilding, utilizing welding instead of riveting to speed up construction. At its peak, a single Liberty ship, which was a large 440-foot cargo vessel, could be assembled from prefabricated sections in an incredible 42 days, with one famous record completion time standing at just 4 days and 15 hours. The scientific and research community was seamlessly integrated into the production effort, marking a massive shift in the relationship between government, academia, and industry. The Office of Scientific Research and Development, OSRD, led by Vannevar Bush, coordinated thousands of scientists working on projects from radar and sonar improvements to penicillin mass production. The most secret and resource-intensive of these projects, requiring immense industrial backing and material output, was the development of the atomic bomb, codenamed the Manhattan Project, which consumed a significant portion of the nation's strategic resources. The transformation required significant financial engineering. The war cost an estimated $300 billion, vastly exceeding any previous national expenditure. To fund this, the government relied heavily on borrowing, raising the national debt from $49 billion in 1941 to $258 billion by 1945. Crucially, it popularized war bonds, or victory bonds, selling nearly $185 billion worth to citizens, businesses, and banks, which not only financed the war, but also successfully controlled inflation by removing excess spending power from the consumer economy. The government had to actively manage inflation and rationing on the home front to ensure a fair distribution of increasingly scarce resources. The Office of Price Administration, OPA, imposed strict price ceilings to control inflation. Essential consumer goods including meat, sugar, coffee, gasoline, and rubber were subjected to widespread rationing using a system of ration books and stamps. This system ensured that the limited supplies were distributed equitably among the civilian population, emphasizing the shared sacrifice required for the military effort. The scarcity of natural rubber, a vital resource largely cut off after Japan seized the rubber plantations of Southeast Asia, presented a crisis for the U.S. war machine. Rubber was essential for tires, gaskets, and countless military components. The government initiated a massive, urgent, and highly successful crash program to develop and mass-produce synthetic rubber. This rapid industrial innovation not only solved the immediate supply crisis, but permanently established the U.S. synthetic rubber industry, ending the nation's reliance on imported natural rubber. The shift to military production created a significant housing crisis in booming industrial centers, particularly along the West Coast, due to shipbuilding and aircraft production. Workers flooded into cities like San Diego, Detroit, and Seattle faster than housing could be built, leading to overcrowded conditions, trailer parks, and intense competition for limited resources. The federal government had to step in, funding the construction of temporary housing projects and trailer camps near massive defense plants to accommodate the influx of war workers and alleviate social tensions caused by the sudden demographic upheaval. The U.S. industrial output was not just for itself. It was the backbone of the Lend-Lease Act, 1941, through which the U.S. provided over $50 billion worth of war material to the Allies, principally Great Britain, the Soviet Union, China, and Free France. This act was instrumental in keeping Allied nations, especially the Soviet Union, in the war during their darkest hours, providing thousands of planes, tanks, and critically, millions of tons of food and non-military supplies, demonstrating the profound global reach of the American production lines and cementing the U.S. role as the arsenal of democracy. The intense competition for scarce materials and labor often created unique labor disputes and friction points across the industrial landscape. Although major union leaderships pledged a no-strike policy for the duration of the war to ensure maximum output, localized wildcat strikes did occasionally occur, usually over persistent grievances regarding stagnant wages, excessive working hours, or unsafe conditions. President Roosevelt and the WPB dealt with these disruptions with urgency and severity, sometimes authorizing the temporary federal seizure of critical infrastructure like coal mines or certain railway systems to ensure continuous, uninterrupted production, absolutely vital to the military effort and national security. The rapid shift of massive government production contracts and investment to the South and West Coast led to colossal, permanent demographic and regional shifts in the U.S. The Sun Belt region, especially California and Texas, experienced phenomenal, exponential growth, fueled by colossal defense contracts for aircraft and ship production. Cities like Los Angeles, San Diego, and Houston exploded in population and economic activity, permanently altering the national political, economic, and cultural balance of power away from the traditional industrial heartland of the Northeast and Midwest Rust Belt. The American Farm Belt also played a critical, often unsung, but absolutely essential role in the war effort. While many agricultural workers were granted specific exemptions from the military draft due to the strategic importance of food production, the farm workforce remained acutely short-handed due to the pull of higher-paying factory jobs. Despite this persistent labor shortage, the rapid introduction of new machinery and improved farming techniques, coupled with intense labor from women, older family members, and even high school students, ensured that American farms provided not only sufficient food for the vast domestic civilian population, but also massive continuous shipments of high-quality food and agricultural supplies to the Allies, a critical, often underestimated logistical component of the global war effort. The inherent speed and efficiency of American manufacturing were dramatically demonstrated in the high-volume production of standardized firearms and small arms. Factories rapidly retooled to produce millions of iconic and reliable military weapons like the M1 Garand semi-automatic rifle, the Thompson submachine gun, and high-volume anti-aircraft weaponry like the Bofors gun. Crucially, meticulous standardization was implemented across all defense contractors, ensuring that parts were fully interchangeable across different manufacturing facilities and assembly lines. This level of precision drastically simplified military logistics and streamlined field repair efforts for American and Allied forces across every global theater. The spirit and dedication of the home front were heavily influenced and successfully maintained by a massive government-led propaganda and media campaign. The Centralized Office of War Information, WWII, produced a constant stream of emotionally resonant films, colorful posters, and morale-boosting radio broadcasts explicitly aimed at encouraging widespread rationing, promoting aggressive resource conservation, and boosting national morale. These powerful campaigns continuously emphasized the direct, personal connection between every civilian's effort and the success of the frontline soldier, urging citizens to embrace the slogan, "Use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without," emphasizing shared national sacrifice. The immense, sustained wartime industrial growth generated a highly concentrated and unprecedented accumulation of both wealth and industrial capital within the United States. The massive strategic expansion of manufacturing capacity created powerful new industrial conglomerates and corporations, many of which successfully retained their monopolistic size and market influence in the post-war era. This wartime expansion effectively launched and solidified the concept of the military-industrial complex and permanently cemented the US's unavoidable role as the world's singular leading industrial and economic superpower, a position it would hold for decades. The financing and ownership of war production relied extensively on a complex and innovative public-private partnership model. The federal government, through specialized agencies, often underwrote the enormous costs of factory conversion and large-scale expansion by granting huge, lucrative, guaranteed cost-plus contracts and, in many cases, even directly funding the construction of massive new industrial plants that were then leased at minimal cost to private companies for operation. This strategic financial mechanism successfully mitigated the immense financial risk for private industry, effectively incentivizing maximum production speed and volume over traditional profit-taking and providing a guaranteed market for all produced war material. While the role of African Americans in the industrial workforce was instrumental to meeting production goals, their experience was tragically marred by frequent and intense racial tensions and violent social strikes. The massive, rapid movement of people and the fierce competition for scarce, inadequate housing and resources led to major destructive race riots in major industrial centers such as Detroit, the deadly 1943 riot, and Harlem, 1943. Despite the profound social and physical conflicts, the unprecedented economic mobility and high wages provided by defense jobs were a crucial, powerful financial step for the community, providing the resources and organizational strength that would fuel the post-war fight for full civil rights and racial equality. The sudden, intense demand for every available raw material led to massive, organized conservation and recycling efforts that dominated the daily life of the home front. Civilian groups and local communities organized massive, continuous drives for all types of strategic materials, including scrap metal, rubber, used tin cans, waste paper, and even used cooking grease, which was vital for the production of glycerin used in explosives. Crucially, children were heavily and enthusiastically involved in these organized collection drives, successfully making the war effort a true national mobilization, where virtually every citizen, regardless of age, felt they had a direct, hands-on, and measurable role in achieving final victory. The remarkable success of the production miracle was not an accident or a stroke of luck. It was the result of a highly specific, unique combination of strategic factors. The United States' immense, largely untapped natural resources, a sophisticated, well-established industrial base, already in place from the boom of the 1920s, a massive, readily available reserve of unemployed labor, a negative legacy of the Great Depression, and, most critically, the unprecedented central government authority and coordination granted to the WPB to direct and prioritize the entire national economy toward a single, cohesive, unified goal of winning the war. Ultimately, the U.S. production miracle proved, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that sheer industrial capacity was, in fact, as strategically decisive as brilliant military generalship or tactical planning. By massively outproducing its enemies in every single category of essential war material, often by a factor of 2, 3, or even 10, the United States successfully created an unbreakable, overwhelming supply chain and fundamentally guaranteed that Allied soldiers and sailors would always possess the decisive technological, logistical, and numerical superiority necessary to survive the fighting and achieve final victory. The comprehensive effort of the home front was, without hyperbole, the indispensable industrial and economic foundation upon which global democracy was successfully saved and secured.